Hello everybody, it's Ashley and welcome to a new sort of video. This is going to be done in a series as there is multiple chapters of the fic I'm going to be reading today. So please sit back and enjoy the ride. Today we're going to be reading Why You Shouldn't Let Seelan Plan a Prank and Why You Shouldn't Let Belarus Help Him. This fanfiction was uploaded on AO3 in July of 2020 and completed in January of 2021. It was uploaded by the user, I don't want to butcher this, but Zhao, and I will put their username and link to their account in the description below. This fanfiction is approximately 10 chapters long with 14,281 words. We are going to make a series out of reading all 10 chapters, which will be done in 10 videos. 1 chapter, 1 video. So I hope you like that. Before we get started, I just want to warn you, in this fanfiction there are mentions of character death, suicide, and drowning, which may be triggering to some viewers. So, viewer discretion is advised, and if any of these topics trigger you, please be aware that I will put timestamps between where the character death is and etc. I don't want to spoil too much of the fanfiction. So without further ado, let's get started reading this fanfic because I have to go to dinner soon. So, do you all know what you're dressing up as for Halloween? Seelan began enthusiastically. It's April, you twat, Ladonia snapped, rolling his eyes. The gang of micronations was seated outside on Y's porch, sheltering themselves from the drizzling rain that had stubbornly refused to let up all day. Their group had no choice but to sit as close to the outside world as they could get and chatter aimlessly until they ran out of subject matter. That doesn't mean we can't start planning early, Seelan insisted. Thankfully, Y cut in before the conversation got out of hand. Oh, hush, you two. We don't need to hear you bickering all the time, right, Saborga? I think they're fine. Anybody in the mood for pasta, or is it just me? The Italian micronation was seated on a wooden bench with his chin resting on both hands. I was trying to think of an art-related costume. Something red, maybe? Kugumugu mused. Like a devil? Y said, her brow furrowed. You mean the ones you see in the haunted houses? With all the fake blood and stuff? Malaysia suggested sourly. At those words, the slightest spark of an idea lit itself in Seelan's 12-year-old brain. The ideology that was constantly circulating in his head, controlling many of his actions, was that he wanted to become country. The other real nations never took him seriously. Half of the time, they could hardly remember who he was, let alone recognize him as one as them. There had to be ways to make sure that they would never forget Seelan again, and his friends had just given him a scheme that would undoubtedly be a solution. It was time to take drastic measures. What do you guys think of pranks? He said. His falsely innocent grin was enough to make most of the other micronations uneasy. They had witnessed the extent his jokes could go to before and weren't anxious to see that level of chaos again. They're all right, I suppose. Kugumugu shifted in his chair, nervously glancing around. Good. I think you might have given me an idea as to what we're going to do for Halloween this year, Seelan exclaimed. But we're going to need a lot of help. By May, Seelan had managed to rope both Ukraine and all his micronation friends into his increasingly complicated, devious plot without letting any other countries find out about it. Ukraine was kind enough to take Seelan seriously, so he treated her as an older sister and often called her to talk in their free time. So what I'm thinking is that we can stage a world meeting on Halloween Day. We'll get everybody to come to the fake meeting, but some of them will be in on the prank. You know, the fun countries, like pretty much anybody other than Britain. Then we'll scare the pants off the nations who don't know. It'll be like a haunted house. The British micronation was babbling to his companions as they looked at him with expressions of horror. Dark, I didn't know you had that in you, Seelan, Ladonia said, his skin paler than usual. Seelan giggled. You'd be surprised. I've done a lot of weird things to try to get other countries to notice me. What did you do to get Miss Ukraine to acknowledge you? Y inquired. Oh, she was just nice enough to say hello when I stuck into a world meeting. Then she asked me who I was, and I told her. She's been my friend since then. Ukraine gave a soft smile at this. So, if you're going to play this prank, who should know? And what are we going to do to scare everyone? She said, to keep the conversation moving. That's a good question. We could just do a haunted house type thing. That was my plan, at least. Seelan responded, tapping his chin with his index finger. That sounds lame. We need something more interesting than that. Ladonia insisted, his perpetual frown deepened. But what? Well, my sister might be able to help us if I can convince her. She's rather excellent at scaring people, Ukraine offered. That would be great, Seelan cried. This is going to be the best Halloween ever! Ukraine called her sister near the end of the month to inform her of the plan, and Belarus was glad to participate if it meant that she could listen to those annoying, pompous nations' screams. Belarus was still more than a little bitter after Russia had turned down her last offer to marriage and immediately run off with America of all people. Now, she would take any chance she could get to frighten the capitalist pig, or even better, accidentally end his life while he perused the haunted house. How will we scare them? Seelan demanded for the millionth time once all the pranksters were assembled at Ukraine's house. I still think we should put spikes coming out of the walls. Belarus grumbled, arms folded. Ukraine gave a long, suffering sigh. We can't do that, sister. That would kill them. So? Belarus retorted. Why do we need to kill people? Saborga said nervously. He had at first been overjoyed to have more pretty women in the area and had flirted shamelessly with both sisters before being shot down. Actively shot down by Ukraine and literally shot down her sister. But at this point, he was very ready to get away from the volatile Belarus. We don't, Saborga. Nobody is going to die. I'll make sure of it. Ukraine reassured kindly, patting the Italian's shoulder. At that comment, Belarus's eyes glittered dangerously. Wait. What if somebody did die? She whispered. Belarus, no! Ukraine chided. The micronation's head swiveled between the two as they spoke like they were watching an intense tennis match. No, not literally die. We could stage their deaths to scare everyone else, Belarus declared. Yes, that's a brilliant idea, Seelan shouted, jumping to his feet. I know Ladonia said this before, but this is really dark, Y reminded them. Exactly! Who will die? Who do you think would be willing to scare everyone else like that? Kugelmugel asked from his perch on the staircase, kicking his dangling feet back and forth. I don't know. There aren't enough fun countries. I might convince Mum to help us. Denmark would probably do it too. He loves trying to scare Norway, but he always fails. Oh, and maybe Prussia. He's fun. America might do it, and I think that if Prussia does, then Spain and France will want to as well. Seelan theorized. This is going to take so much planning, Y complained. But it's going to be so worth it! This will be the greatest prank we've ever pulled, believe it! After weeks upon weeks of drawing layouts, buying, researching, long-distance calling, and devious plotting, the plan was finally in place. At long last, all their hard work would pay off. Or it wouldn't, and the countries who were about to be victims would never forgive them. But it wasn't the time to be thinking like that. Seelan was practically vibrating with excitement at his designated spot in front of the control panel. He turned around when he heard Ukraine's gentle voice. All right, Seelan, you may want to leave the room now. People are arriving at the meeting, and I don't want you to be scared, she said, herding the micronation out the door and into the hallway. Seelan pouted. He wanted to watch Belarus's haunted house. However, he had been told time and time again that he wouldn't be allowed to stay in the control room where a multitude of monitors and security cameras would broadcast the progress of the prank. He hesitantly shuffled out of the room, shooting the static blurred television screens one last longing glance. Despite Ukraine knowing that Seelan had helped formulate the plan and was much older than he looked, she was sure that the horrifying plot her sister had created would scar the young nation. Belarus's hunger for blood really did confuse Ukraine, but she was willing to put her anxiety aside for the spirit of Halloween. After closing the door behind Seelan and locking it so that he couldn't peek in, she turned back to the monitors, giving Belarus a nervous glance, which the other nation didn't notice. Are you sure about this, sister? Ukraine asked. There's no going back now. Everyone's here, after all.